We're starting at the bottom of Daf Nun Tes, where it says V'loi, the last few lines of the page. So the Gemara here brought the halacha regarding the blood of a carbon, that after the blood was sprayed on the Mizbeach, there's no more Me'ilah. And it's proven from the fact that what happened to the blood? It was poured down on the foundation, then it flowed out of the Yazara, and then they sold it to the gardens to be used as fertilizer. If it was really still retaining its kedusha of a carbon and there was me'ilah to it, there would be no way to sell it. You can't redeem it b'chlal. The fact that it was sold means that min ha'teireh there is no me'ilah anymore. And the Gemara explained that the reason for that is because ein l'chad dava shanasas mitzvasai u'mayalim bay. You never find anything that was already utilized for its mitzvah, its purpose was fulfilled, that there should still be a me'ilah. So once the blood was sprayed on the Mizbeach and the mitzvah is done, there is no me'ilah. So the Gemara here asks a question on that. V'loi, you don't find anything where the mitzvah was done and there still is me'ilah? V'harei trumas hadeshen. What's about removing the ashes of the Mizbeach? So of course these ashes, the mitzvah was fulfilled with them. What are the ashes from? They come from the karbanis that were burning on the night, all night on the Mizbeach. The mitzvah is fulfilled. And nevertheless, what has to be done with these ashes? So Rashi here brings the pasuk. You take off the ashes and it's placed near the Mizbeach and it has to be buried over there. And there was actually a miracle that took place, that all the ashes that were placed near that area in the Mizbeach sunk into the ground and they got buried there. So Rashi says it's asabana. Even after the mitzvah was done with it, the remnants, these ashes from the karbanis, you're not allowed to have any hana of it. And Rashi then adds, if it's asabahana because it's still holy, so that also should automatically mean that it still has its kedusha of a carbon, and therefore there's me'ilah as well. That's Rashi's addition. Taisvus, however, argues, it's a very long Taisvus here, but one of the points of this Taisvus is, he says, no, it's only asr b'hana, but it's not asr with me'ilah. The Isser Hana is because of this pasuk. It says v'samay eitzel mizbeach, that it should be placed there. You're not allowed to use it. You're not allowed to take it for anything, and it should be buried there. But there's no Isser Me'ilah though. Taisvus says the Gemara's question is still a question because you see that even after the mitzvah is fulfilled, nevertheless Isser Hana still applies. This concept that we're saying that once the mitzvah is fulfilled, so now you can do with it whatever you want. So there should be no Isser Me'ilah and no Isser Hana either. Why is there even an Isser Hana for this? So that's our question regarding the blood. How could the Gemara say this rule regarding the blood, that since it was already sprayed in the Mizbeach, therefore there's no Isser anymore? Answers the Gemara, you're right, Trumas Hadeshen is an exception. Mishum, the have Trumas Hadeshen, this case of Trumas Hadeshen, and then another case, Big Day Kohuna, the begodim that the Kohen Gadol wears on Yom Kippur. So what's the halacha of the Kohen Gadol's clothing that he wears in Yom Kippur? So Rashi here brings this, we learned it in the Gemara before, that what does the Kohen Gadol do with those white garments that he wore on Yom Kippur? The pasuk says, V'hinicham sham. He has to place it down. Yeah, he takes them off after he does his avodah in Yom Kippur. He leaves it there. It has to be buried. It could never be used again. So we see again that the mitzvah was done with it, completed, and nevertheless, it's still asabana. You have to bury it. So these are two cases where you see that the mitzvah is done and it's still asr. So these are shnei ksuvim abam ke'echad. These are two psukim that are saying the same point. And the rule is, v'chol shnei ksuvim abam ke'echad, when I have two psukim that come and say the same point, ein melamden. They are an exception, and I can't learn from there to any other place. So therefore, these are the two exceptions, but otherwise, any other part of a carbon, once the mitzvah is completed, there's no Issa Hana, there's no Issa Me'ilah. So the Gemara has a few questions in this. First of all, the question is, Haniche l'Rabbana. This only works according to the Rabbanon. The Omri, the Rabbanon said, and we learned this argument before, V'hinicham sham, when it says regarding the big day kohuna of the Kohen Gadol, that he should place it there after he's completed his Avodah Yom Kippur, what does it mean? Melamed shatun and geniza, that those garments have to be hidden. They can't be used anymore. But according to Rab Daisa, the Amar, Rab Daisa says, big day kohuna, what is done with the begadim, the white garments of the Kohen Gadol after Yom Kippur? He says, ru'yin ein l'kohen hedyet. They can be used for the kohen hedyet. And if you remember, Rab Daisa said, v'hinicham sham just means that the Kohen Gadol can't use those same garments the next year Yom Kippur. For the Kohen Gadol himself, he has to get a new garments. But it could be used for the kohen hedyet during the entire year. Rab Daisa's opinion is that the big day kohen hedyet and the big day, the white garments that a Kohen Gadol wears in Yom Kippur are the same. Even the gartel is made of the same quality, so it's the same. It can be used all year. So it doesn't have to be, there's no geniza done. So Michael Meimar, what are we going to say? So according to him, we see that once the mitzvah was done, so there is no meila for this. Right? So Rashi over here says it could be used by the Kohen Hedyot. What does it mean if it could be used by the Kohen Hedyot? So Rashi says if it's being used by the Kohen Hedyot, that means that there's no meila, because maybe you could still argue and think, wait a minute, the Kohen Hedyot is using it while he's doing the Avodah. So therefore, he's allowed to use it during the Avodah, but maybe when he's not doing the Avodah, he's not allowed to use it, and there is meila. So Rashi says no. Interesting. Rashi says, Le'nitne Teira le'malachei asharis. Teira is not given for malachim. She is reason le'paishta miyad. That the Kohen Hedyot must take off his garments immediately when he's done his Avodah. When he's done his Avodah, he continues walking and he's still wearing his garments. He's having the benefit of wearing these garments even after he finished his Avodah. So here we see, these are the garments that the Avodah of what these garments were prepared for, which is for the Kohen Gadol, is completed. His Avodah of Yom Kippur is completed. And nevertheless, we say that following that over here, so because he completed his Avodah, there's no meila anymore. And the Kohen Hedyot could use it, and he could wear it even after he completes his Avodah. So therefore, according to the Abdaisa, we can't consider the case of Bigdei Kahuna to be another exception where the Avodah is completed with it, and there still is meila. No, there is no meila. So Trumas Hadeshen turns out to be the only one. So why don't we learn out from Trumas Hadeshen to all other places? So the Gemara answers, there's another example. Mishom da have a Trumas Hadeshen ve'egla arufa. There's Trumas Hadeshen, and then together with that, there's also egla arufa, which is the story with the case where you find a dead body, I don't know what to do, and who killed it, and you bring a calf, and you have to break off its neck. So that egla arufa also has a din like a carbon, and what do you do with that egla arufa? You're not allowed to have any anah of it. It has to be left there, has to be buried right over there. As Rashi here brings the pasuk, Sham teig nizasar, has to be buried there. So this is another example where you fulfill the mitzvah with it, and nevertheless there's an isur hana that still applies. Or according to some opinions, there's actually even an isur me'ila regarding the egla arufa. So they are the shnei ksuvim abam kechad, and v'chol shnei ksuvim abam kechad ein melamda. Whenever the Torah says something twice for two different instances, so it only applies there, and you can't learn out to anywhere else. But now the Gemara questions this very premise: is this true that you can't learn out from these two psukim that come together? Ein melamdin. This is all good, a good answer according to the opinion that says that this rule is true. That whenever the Torah writes and repeats something once and a second time, so then these two places are an exception and you can't learn to anywhere else. But there's another opinion that says that even when the Torah writes something twice, I still could learn out from there to other places. What are you going to say? Why don't we learn out from there to any other place, including the blood, that even after the mitzvah is done, there still should be milah? And says the Gemara, Trei miyuti ksivi. There are two miyutim that says here. It's not only the fact that it's two psukim, but there's actually a miyut. By the halacha of Trumas Hadeshen, it says v'sam moi eitzel ha-mitzbeach, that this Trumas Hadeshen should be placed near the mizbeach. So the Torah is saying specifically v'sam moi. It doesn't say v'sam. V'sam means only this, not anything else. There's no isser hana by anything else after the mitzvah is done. And then by the egla arufa, when it says it has to be buried there, so it says ha egla ha arufa. Only this egla that you chop off its neck, only that has to be buried there and not anything else. So there's a miyut. The Torah is specifically saying only these two. Anything besides these two, once the mitzvah is done, there's no issa me'ila and there's no issa hana either. Now the Gemara comes back to the pasuk that was brought before, where it brought the source for the fact that for the blood there's no issa me'ila. So if you remember, there were three different opinions there. In the pasuk there it says, Anina sativ lachem ala mizbeach lachaper, and then it said ki adam hu banefesh. One opinion learned it out from lachem, that the blood is yours to use. Another opinion learned it out from lachaper, and a third opinion learned it out from the word hu. So the Gemara now explains, you have three opinions here, but the fact is you have three extra words in the pasuk. So what are these three extra words teaching me? Nahani, tlosi, kroi, bedam, lamali. These three extra words in this pasuk that it says regarding blood, what is it coming to teach me? Sochad, the Gemara says, one is coming to teach me lumutim in naisar, to tell you that the isser of naisar that applies to all parts of karbanis does not apply to blood. If you eat the blood of leftover karbanis after it's a lot of time to be eaten, you're only going to be over the isser of eating the blood. No, the Isser of Naisa, of the leftover carbon, does not apply. And one, as we said before, the extra pasuk comes to say that there's no me'ila for the blood after it was spread in the Mizbeach. And the third one is to be memayet, to exclude that the Isser of Tumah does not apply to blood. Which means the Isser of a person which is Tameh, that you're not allowed to eat any kachim while you're Tameh, that does not apply to blood. If you eat the blood, you only over on the Isser of eating blood, but not the Isser of eating kachim while you're Tameh. Now the Gemara points out, isn't there another thing that you might think that it should come to be memayet, which is pigel? What's pigel? Pigel is when you are makriv a carbon and you have the wrong machshava. You have the idea that you're going to do the aveda of the carbon or eat it out of its time. That's pigel. So are we not memayet pigel from here? So the Gemara says, Avol mi pigel lo yitzarech kra, lo yitzarech lemuti. For pigel, we don't need any pasuk to be memayet. Lo yitzarech lemuti kra. The pasuk here does not have to exclude pigel from the blood that's being spread on the mizbeach. Why not? So the Gemara here brings a Mishnah which gives us the rule regarding what part of the carbon pigel applies and regarding what part of the carbon pigel does not apply. And therefore, from that, it's automatically understood that blood is not part of it. So you don't need a pasuk for the blood. What does it say in the Mishnah? So here's the rule for pigel. The Tanan, the Mishnah says, Kol sheyesh loy matirin, any part of the carbon that cannot be used without a matir, without having something else permitting it to be used. And the Mishnah spells out, bein la adam, bein la mizbeach. Whether it refers to whether the person wants to eat part of the carbon, whether you want to be makriv, part of the carbon on the mizbeach. Chayav and all of mishum pigel. That's the part of the carbon that pigel applies to. In other words, when you bring a carbon, what happens to the carbon? Part of it goes for the mizbeach, and part of it goes for the kainim, or the bailim, or the owners to eat. But here's the rule. You can't be makriv anything on the mizbeach before you do the zrika of the dam. You can't eat any part of the carbon before you do the zrika of the dam. Which means that after you shech the carbon, it's aser. It's forbidden to be used until you have a matir. What's that matir? What's going to permit it to be eaten or to be burnt on the mizbeach? The zrika of the dam. So the rule of pigel is only this part of the carbon that's relying on the zrika of the dam to be matir, to permit it to be eaten or to be burnt in the mizbeach, that's the part of the carbon that pigel applies to. So it's learned out from a pasuk by carbon shlomim. That's not on what? Not on what? The Gemara now finishes off with damatzmai. Now the blood itself, matir hu, it does not have to become permitted by anything. It itself permits other things. In other words, the dam. What's the dam used for? The dam is used for the zrika on the mizbeach. The dam does not rely on anything else to permit it to become useful for the zrika on the mizbeach. The dam is the one that provides the heter to eat it or to burn it on the mizbeach. So the rule of pigel is that we learn out from the psukim, where the source of pigel says by carbon shlomim, that only that part of the carbon that's relying on the blood to be matter it, to be eaten or to be burnt on the mizbeach, so that part of the carbon is what pigel applies to. The blood itself, which is the source of the matter, pigel does not apply to that. That's the rule. So therefore, to say that there's no pigel for blood, we don't need a separate carbon for that. That's based on this rule that's clear on its own.
A carbon that became pigel.
Correct?
So the dam also became pigel.
No, but there's no, the isser of pigel does not apply to the dam, which means if you eat the blood, then you're over on the isser of eating blood, but you're not over on any isser of eating pigel. When you eat pigel, the halacha is what happens if you eat pigel, there's a chi of kares. Right. But there's no chi of kares if you're going to eat the blood, because by the blood, the pigel doesn't apply. Sagt the Mishnah, Kol Maaseh Yom Kippurim. All the different details that we learned until here in the Mishnah regarding the Kayin Gadol's Aveda and Yom Kippur. Ha'amar, ala Seder, which is said on the order that we said it in the Mishnah here. Im hikte Maaseh l'chaveiroi, if you did something before something else out of the order that it was supposed to be done, lo yasa klum, you've done nothing. The Aveda has to be done over again. And the Mishnah here brings one example. Hinktim dama soir le dama par. If you sprayed the blood of the goat before you sprayed the blood of the bull, this is referring to inside in the Kodesh HaKadoshim. So you did it out of order. Yachzor v'yaze midama soir la'achar dama par. So you have to do it over again, which means you're going to have to shech the carbon over again from the par. You're going to have to take the dama par and spray it, and then come back and do the sar after the par in the right order.
He has to take another.
He has to bring another par, correct? Yeah. Huh? Does he have to shecht it over again?
He didn't shecht it.
No. He shechted both of them. He shechted the par and the soir, and so he's going to have to do over. He's going to have to do the zrika of the par over again for the dam. Well, so l'chayre he doesn't have to shecht it over again. You're right. We'll see in the Gemara. L'chayre again. He sprayed the dam of the goat of the soir before the dam of the par. So the Mishnah is saying it's worthless, and he has to do it over again. Yeah, he has to spray the dam of the soir after the dam of the par. Okay. Now the next halach in the Mishnah, what happens? Ve'im at shelegomar esamatonis shebifnim. He was doing the aveda of spraying the blood inside the kodesh hakadoshim. So he's spraying the blood from the par, let's say. Nishpach adam, the blood spilled. So what does he do now? Yavi dam acher, he has to bring other blood, and ve'yachzer betchila, and he has to start all over again from the beginning. Mibifnim, from the aveda that has to be done inside. So let's say he was spraying the dam of the par, and he came to it's achas lamayla b'sheva lamata. So let's say he was holding by zrikin number 5 for the sheva lamata, and then the blood spills. So he can't continue going to 6 and 7 to just complete where he was holding. He has to go back to the beginning. Over here, he's going to have to shecht over another carbon again because the whole blood spilled. He has no blood anymore. He's going to have to go and shecht over a par again and start over from the beginning. Then the Mishnah that is continues. V'chein beheichol. The same halacha applies to the heichel. That if it got spilled in the middle of spraying the blood in the heichel, so he has to start over again from where he was, the beginning of the zrika of the dam in the heichel, but only for the heichel. He doesn't have to go back to start over the zrika even for the kodesh hakadoshim inside. That he did separately, and that was done right. He has to shecht over the carbon to do the zrika of the heichel. And the same thing also regarding the zrika that's done on the mizbeach hazav, that he has to, if it's spilled in the middle of those zrikas on the mizbeach hazav, he has to do them over again, but not the zrika before that's done against the kapairas and the heichel. Shekulon kapara b'fnei atzman. Each one of them is a separate kapara for itself. There's 3 different parts. The kapara and the kodesh hakadoshim, the kapara of spraying the blood against the pareiches and the heichel, and then the kapara on the mizbeach. So each one separately, if you got stuck in the middle, you only have to complete and start over again for that part. Rabbi Elazar, that is, with Rab Shimon Oimrim, they argue and say, Namimokim shapasak mishamu maschel. Wherever you got stuck, from wherever the blood spilled, that's from where you start over again. You don't have to start over again from the entire zrika of that chelik that you were doing. So if you got stuck by after doing 5 zrikas and then it spilled, so you come back and you continue from where you left off. That's where they don't have to start from the beginning. Huh? Yeah, sagt die Gemara, Tan Rabbanam, you learned in Abraisa. Kol Maisi Yom Kippurim. So here in the Mishnah, it just said that anything that has to be done in Yom Kippur by the Kohen Gadol has to go on the right Seder, and if you went out of the Seder, it's worthless. You have to do it over again. So here the Gemara brings 2 opinions about this. We had this before. It doesn't refer to all the Karbanis on Yom Kippur. So in Abraisa we learned, Kol Ma'aseh Yom Kippurim Amal Seder, all the different halachas and that you have to do on Yom Kippur, and the order, Im Hikdim Ma'aseh L'Chaveda. If you did something out of order before the other Aveda, Lo Yasa Klum. What you did is worthless. And here the Mishnah brings 2 opinions regarding which Aveda this refers to. Rav Yehuda says, Ei Mesai, when is this true? B'dvarim anasim b'bigdei lovan. First of all, it's only those Avedas that are done with the white garments, and also mibifnim, only regarding the Aveda that's done inside the Kodesh HaKadoshim. Aval, dvarim anasim b'bigdei lovan, mibachutz, other Avedas, even if they're done with the white garment, but it's on the outside, meaning in the Heichal, or for sure in the Azara, im hikte ma'aseh l'chaveda, if it was done out of order, masha'asa aseh. But the Eved, once it's done, it's done. So when do you have to have it in the right order? There are 2 conditions. It has to be with the white garment and inside the Kodesh HaKadoshim. The Gemara is going to bring the source in a minute. Rab Nechemya says only one condition. Only those Avedas that are done with the white garments, whether you're inside the Kodesh HaKadoshim, whether you're on the outside, doesn't make a difference. The other Avedas done on Yom Kippur, which are done with the gold, the regular gold garments of the Kohen Gadol on the outside, there I say Mashasasi. What's done is done, even if it's out of order, it doesn't matter. So that's the argument here. Do I say any Avedis with the white garments has to be redone if it's out of order, or only the ones that are done inside the Kodesh HaKadoshim? Amar Rabbi Yochanan, the Shnei Mikra Chadarsha, the source of both of their opinions comes from the same pasuk. Because by the Aveda of the Kohen Gadol Yom Kippur, the Torah says at the end, V'hoisa zois lachem l'chuka saylam, this should be for you as a chukah, as the law, achas bashana, once a year. So chukah always means that it has to be done exactly like the Torah describes it, in this order. So now, regarding what does the Torah say, chukah, that it has to be done in this order. Rabbi Yehuda says, Mokayim shemiskaprim by pamachas b'shana. When it says in the Torah chukah, and it says that this chukah is achas b'shana, it refers to the place, to the Aveda done in the place that you enter there only once a year, in the Kodesh HaKadoshim. So therefore Rabbi Yehuda says it's only with the white garments inside the Kodesh HaKadoshim. Rabbi Nechemya says, no, it doesn't say in the place. Dvarim ha-meskaprim bahem pamachas b'shana. Those are Vedas that are done once a year. Whether it's in the place that you go into once a year, or b'chlal, all the Avedas that are unique for this day, that are done once a year with the white garments. So therefore it's lav dafke inside. Any Aved is done with the white garments. That's the explanation of the Machlekes according to Rabbi Yochanan. So the Gemara asks, how does Rabbi Yehuda understand this? Otu, Rabbi Yehuda, Makayim Ksiv. Why would Rabbi Yehuda say that when it says chukah, that it must be done this way, and it must be done only regarding those Avedas that are achas b'shana? So Rabbi Yehuda says only in the Avedas that are done in the place that you enter once a year. Does it say in the Torah the word Makayim? It doesn't say Makayim, it says achas b'shana. So shouldn't it refer to all the Avedas that are unique for today, even not in the place of the Kodesh HaKadoshim? So therefore the Gemara brings another pshat. Ella, hainu time with Rabbi Yehuda. The reason for Rabbi Yehuda's opinion is because really there are two miyutim here. There are two things that the pasuk is saying that are memayit, that make this requirement very specific. Time with Rabbi Yehuda, the reason for Rabbi Yehuda is because ksiv zais, it says the word zais, which is a word that excludes, specifically only this, and ksiv achas, and it says the word achas, which means only this unique aveda of today. So we have two miyutim here. So therefore Rabbi Yehuda creates two conditions. Chad lemuti bigdei lava mibachutz. One time the Torah is saying that any aveda that's done with the bigdei lava on the outside of the Kodesh HaKadoshim is not included in this requirement of chukah. And v'chad lemuti bigdei zav. And another miyut, the Torah is coming to say that any aveda that's done with the bigdei zav is also not included in this requirement of chukah, that it must be done in this order. So there's two miyutim here. But Rav Nechemya, now according to Rav Nechemya, that says that there's only one condition: any aveda done with the bigdei lavan must be done in this order. So how does he explain the second miyut? Chad lemudi bigdei zav. So Rav Nechemya says one is to say that all avedas done with the gold garments do not have this requirement to done in the order. The chad lemute shirayim, and another one is excluding specifically the Aveda that's done. It is done with the white garments, but it's the Aveda of pouring the shirayim, the leftovers of the blood, on the Yisayid of the Mizbeach. That Aveda is not Ma'akiv. If it's done out of order, if it's done at the wrong time, that Aveda is not Ma'akiv. Specifically, that Aveda is coming to be Memayit, but it's not coming to be Memayit all the other Aveda is done with the white garments outside of the Kodesh HaKadoshim, the spraying of the blood and the Mizbeach, and nothing else is it coming to be Memayit, only this, the Shirayim. So on that the Gemara explains Rabbi Yehuda doesn't hold at this. Rabbi Yehuda says, why are you singling out specifically this Aveda of the Shirayim, that it's coming to exclude that? Ma'akfi. If all of the Avedas done with the white garments, even outside the Kodesh HaKadoshim, must be done in this order, so then everything is included, including the Shirayim. That's also part of the Aveda. V'loi ma'akvi. And if you have a pasuk to exclude all of these Avedas outside the Kodesh HaKadoshim, that they don't have to be done. B'diavad, if it wasn't done in the order, it's not ma'akiv. So then the Shirayim is also not ma'akiv. So as Rashi explains, what Rabbi Yehuda is basically telling Rabbi Nechemya is, why are you singling out this Aveda of pouring the Shirayim on the foundation of the Mizbech? This is different. That I only am amayit that. Why only that? If you have a second miyut, either you include all the Avedas that are in the same category. They're all in the same category, Avedas done with the white garments outside the Kodesh HaKadoshim. Or, if you don't include it, so then the Shirayim are not included either. What is the reason to single out these Shirayim separately? That's Rabbi Yehuda's argument against Rabbi Nechemya. And here, the Gemara will bring the source of this concept. Because basically, what it comes out is, what's Rabbi Nechemya saying? Rabbi Nechemia is saying that the status of this Aveda of pouring the Shirayim on the Mizbeach is different than all the other Avedas. It's not on the same level. It's not on the same level as the Zrike that's done against the Pareiches that is, or onto the Mizbeach Hazav. This is a lower status of Aveda, and therefore I specifically exclude that. Whereas Rabbi Yehuda is saying, no, the Aveda of pouring the blood on the foundation of the Mizbeach is integral to the Aveda. It's part of all the Avedas that are done, so therefore you can't exclude it separately from everything else. So the Gemara brings the source of Rabbi Yehuda's opinion. Kedetanya, like we learned in the Braise, it says as follows. Pasuk says, "V'chila mechaper es hakodesh," that the Kohen Gadol concludes the aveda of doing the kapara of spraying the bloods in the kodesh. So, if we learn from this pasuk, im kiper, if he sprayed all the bloods, the kapara refers to the making the atonement by spraying all the bloods. So then kila, if he sprayed everything, then he's completed with his aveda. He finished. V'im loy kiper, if he didn't spray all the bloods, he left something out. Loy kila, so then he did not finish. There's no such a thing that you could do 50%, 80%. Either it's all done or not. If it's not all done, then you didn't complete it. Divrei Rabbi Akiva. That's what Rabbi Akiva says. Amar loy Rabbi Yehuda. Rabbi Yehuda responds to Rabbi Akiva and says, Mipnei ma loy noima. Why wouldn't you say the drasha that you just said, but use it in a different language? Say it in the exact reverse. Im kila. If he completed, if he finished spraying everything, if he did all the Avedas that are mentioned in the pasuk, kiper, then it results in a kapara, brings about the atonement. V'im loy kila, if he did not conclude everything was supposed to be done, loy kiper, then he did not create any atonement. Which means, she'im chiser achas min matones, if he's lacking one of the matones, one of the things that had to be placed through the zrika on the mizbeach or wherever it was, lo yasav lo klum. What he did is worthless. So now, when you look over at this machlokes between Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Yehuda, they seem to be saying the exact same thing. It's just switching around the words. Kila mechaper, mechaper kila, but they're saying the exact same thing. So the Gemara says, Vamrina, and the question was asked on this Braise here, my benayu. What's really the difference between them? So there's two opinions here. Rabbi Yechanan and Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi. There was an argument between Rabbi Yechanan and Rabbi Yeshua ben Levi. Chad Omar, one of them said, you're right, there really is no difference between them. Mashma is darshan benayu. The difference between them is just in the words of how you darshan the pasuk. Do you say that once you mechaper fully, then you finished? Or do you say once you finish doing everything, then the kapara comes about? But it means the same thing. That's one opinion. But v'chad amar, another opinion said, Shirayim ma'akvi ikke benayu. The difference between them is what we were discussing here, the shirayim, that leftover blood that has to be poured onto the outside mizbeach, is that ma'akiv as well. And basically, what, as Rashi explains, what Rabbi Akiva was saying is that you have to, Rabbi Akiva's lashon was, im kiper kila. Kippur refers to the zrika. When in the Torah, whenever it talks about the zrika of the blood on the mizbeach, it says the lashon kapara. The kapara comes through the zrika. So therefore, Rabbi Akiva was saying all the various different zrikas must be done in the kodesh hakadoshim, on the kapara, on the pareiches, on the mizbeach. The zrikas are necessary, and once you finish that, you're done. The pouring out of the shirayim on the yesod, even if that wasn't done, you're finished. You did the kapara already. Whereas when Rabbi Yehuda said im kilo kiper, Rabbi Yehuda was saying not only the zrikis, but even you have to finish it completely. What does finishing completely mean? Even to pour out the shirayim on the foundation of the mizbeach. That's also part of it. That's what Rabbi Yehuda came to say. So this is the source where we see Rabbi Yehuda's opinion that pouring out the blood on the mizbeach is an integral part of the aveda. You can't single that out separately and say that if that's done out of order, then it doesn't matter. That's why he argues in Rabbi Nechemia. Whereas Rabbi Nechemia held, what's Rabbi Nechemia's opinion? No. He singles out pouring the shirayim on the mizbeach separately because he holds like Rabbi Akiva that the pouring of the blood on the mizbeach is not compared to the rest of the aveda that's done with the blood, because those avedas must be done, they're integral to the kapara, whereas the pouring out of the blood is not as integral, therefore it's not ma'akiv. That's the basis of their machlokes here. So now the Gemara asks on this explanation of the machlokes, how could you say that Rabbi Nechemia holds that the pouring of the blood on the foundation is not an integral part of the Aveda, and b'diavad, if you don't do it, it's okay? Me, Rabbi Yechanan Hachi. Did Rabbi Yechanan say so? So this was all Rabbi Yechanan that was explaining the machlokes of Rabbi Yehuda and Rabbi Nechemia. But Rabbi Yechanan said elsewhere, Tana, we learned there in the Mishnah that Rabbi Nechemia is saying Kedivrei Ha'omer, like the opinion that says Shirayim Ma'akvi, pouring the Shirayim of the blood on the Mizbeach is Ma'akiv. It is integral for the Avodah. It's Ma'akiv. It must be done. Regarding what did he say this? So Rashi here brings it's regarding the halacha of shchutei chutz. The halacha, if you bring a carbon outside the Beis HaMikdash, is the lav and the isser of shchutei chutz and the kares of shchutei chutz is only if you do the avodah outside, something that must be done, part of the carbon inside. If it's part of the Aveda, that this is the way it must be done inside, the Shchite, the Zrike, the Kabbalah, the Halacha, all these Avedas that must be done inside, if you do those Avedas outside the Beis HaMikdash, then there's Kares. An Aveda that must not be done inside, if you do it outside, there is no Kares. And Rabbi Nechemia says, if you pour the blood outside, the way it's done inside, that there is Kares. So from here you see that Rabbi Nechemia's opinion is that pouring the blood is an integral part of the carbon. And therefore there would be kares for that if you pour it outside. And here are we saying, outside the Beis HaMikdash, a person creates a bama outside there and he pours it outside. So he's chayiv kares for that. And here we're saying that according to Rabbi Nechemia, pouring the blood is not ma'akiv. Yeah, according to Rabbi Yechanan, he explained Rabbi Nechemia's opinion this way. That according to Rabbi Nechemia, we say that regarding pouring the blood, it's not ma'akiv. Therefore, we exclude after the pouring of the blood that to say that it's not ma'akiv. So that's a contradiction here in Rabbi Nechemia's opinion according to Rabbi Yechanan. Kashya. So the Gemara doesn't answer this; it leaves it as a question. So the Gemara, Omer Rabbi Chanina said, talking over here about the order of the Aveda. Ketayres shachafna kaidim shchitase shopar. The ketayres, that you took the handful of this ketayres to prepare it, to bring it in the Kodesh HaKadoshim, and it was taken before the shchita of the par, layasav alei. It's out of order, and therefore you've done nothing. Okay, so these are avedas that are being done outside. It's not right. The order is first you shech the bull, and then afterwards you do the chafina of the ketayres. So if it's done the other way around, you've done nothing. So now the Gemara says, Kaman. Who is Rabbi Chanina saying this according to? The like Rabbi Yehuda. It seems to be not like the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. Why? The Rabbi Yehuda, according to Rabbi Yehuda, Ha'amar, Rabbi Yehuda said, Ki ksiva chukah. When do we apply the halacha of chukah that it has to be done in order? B'dvaram anasim b'bigdei lovim b'bifnim. Only things that are done with the white garments inside the Kodesh HaKadoshim. Hu d'chsiva. Regarding that, it says. But over here, the order of the shchita and the chafina, which are being done outside in the azara, it doesn't apply to this. But the Gemara says, no, that's not true. I can tell you that this follows even according to the opinion of Rabbi Yehuda. Why? Because tzorech pnim kepnim dami. Rabbi Yehuda will agree those Avedas that are done outside, but their entire purpose is for the inside, that's like an Aveda that's being done inside. The shchita of the par is for the purpose of taking the blood into the Kodesh HaKadoshim. The chafina of the ketayres is for the purpose to gather the ketayres to take into the Kodesh HaKadoshim. So therefore it has the halacha like the avodah done on the inside that it has to be done in order. So now the Gemara asks a question on this from our Mishnah. Now we learned in our Mishnah, if you were doing the avodah inside the Kodesh HaKadoshim and you didn't finish, what happened? Nishpach adam, the blood spilled. Yavi dam acher, you have to bring a new blood. And v'yachze v'yazeh b'tchila, you have to start over the azor from the beginning of that seder that you were doing inside, mibifnim, for what has to be done over there inside. So now, if you have to bring new blood, what does that mean? You're shechting a new par. So if you're doing the shechita over again, frek the Gemara, if what Rab Chanina said is true, yachzor v'yachvayim bayalei, the Mishnah should say, besides doing the shechita of the par over again, you should have to do the chafina over again. Because what happened? You did the shechita of one par, and then after that you already did the chafina, you took the handful for the ketayres, but now you have to do the shechita over again. So if you're doing the shechita over again, you have to also take the handful of the ketayres a second time to be done after the shechita. So why doesn't it say that in the Mishnah? The Mishnah just says, bring new blood. Why doesn't it say that you have to do the chafina over again? So the Gemara answers, B'ketayres loi kamayri. The Mishnah is not talking about the case of the ketayres. Which means, as Rashi here says, yes, you're right. You're going to have to do the chafina of the ketayres over again, but the Mishnah is not focusing on that. The Mishnah is focusing on the fact that you have to get new blood to do the zrika over again. But once you have to shech the bull over again, self-understood that you're going to have to do the chafina over again because it's out of order.